Titans, go!
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, back in Doom Manor once again as we continue our Doom Patrol series here on Titan Talk, and I'm here with my co-host, everybody's wonderful and favorite co-host, Jesse Jackson. Hi, Jesse. How are you today?
I'm good, Charles. I'm ready for some Doom dialogue.
Yes.
Instead of Titan Talk, Doom dialogue.
Doom dialogue. That's
Yeah.
good. I didn't think about that. That's good.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to rename the podcast, huh? And confuse everybody.
Exactly.
So, yes, here at episode 28, we are going to talk Danny Patrol, and which obviously is a reference to Danny the Street, a pretty significant supporting character during Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol run that gets introduced in this episode, which was the 8th episode of Season 1, just released here a couple days ago on April 5th, 2019, also known as the 22nd anniversary of my marriage to Lori Skaggs, my beautiful wife. And we celebrated that over the weekend. And what better way to kind of finish up the day after Lori falls asleep late at night, and I've got the TV to myself, and I just kicked back and watched Danny Patrol. So that was the end of my evening because, hey, we're old.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. 22 years ago, I was there in Ohio,
Yes.
part of the ceremony. Truly one of my sweetest memories. And so, yes, very,
Yes,
very cool.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that here, maybe not, definitely on Next Stop Everywhere, where Jesse was kind enough to give my bride away.
Yes.
At our wedding, and played a very important role, and that is something Lori and I both will treasure forever.
Yeah.
As long as we live.
And it's kind of perfect. It was also one of the few Charles, Lori and I have seen each other multiple times since, but it's one of the few Titan Talk meetups that I got to attend in person.
Yes. So our original Titan Talk, the Titans fan fiction group that is the basis for the name of our podcast back in the 90s that we were both a part of. And that's how we kind of all met, and how Lori and I met, and that's where we got to know Jesse, and that's everything all even though the original fan fiction group folded, we've remained friends ever since. And obviously we've been doing these podcasts for Southgate Media Group ever since.
Absolutely.
And having a lot of fun. So it's even after all these years, you've put up with me almost as long as Lori has. So congratulations to you too.
Absolutely. I am always happy that you're part of my life, and of course my beautiful daughter Lori.
Yes, thank you. All right.
So back to the Doom Patrol.
Yes, back to the Doom Patrol. Sorry for the little digression, but I couldn't resist mentioning
No.
that.
I appreciate it.
So this episode was written by Tom Farrell, who previously co-wrote the episode Puppet Patrol, and directed by Dermot Downes, our first returning director of this season, who previously directed the episode Donkey Patrol, the second episode of the season.
Okay.
So obviously a couple of people that are very familiar with the show and how it works, returning. And as far as guest cast this time, we have Alan Mingo Jr. as Agent Morris Wilson / Maura Lee Karupt, which I love that drag name. That's a great drag name.
Yes.
Alan has previously appeared in episodes of Ray Donovan and The Deuce, and also Frasier, so I thought I'd mention those. We had Jon Briddell as Darren Jones, the leader of the Bureau of Normalcy, and he's been in some interesting projects. He was in the 2009 reboot of Knight Rider, which I thought was kind of interesting, and he was also on American Crime Story and The Resident not too long ago. And then we had Brent Bailey as Doug, Karen's object of her obsession. He's been in episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Rizzolian Isles.
Okay.
And we also had Ethan McDowell as Forsythe, and he was on a couple episodes of The Gifted and the 2018 reboot of MacGyver.
Nice.
So that's our guest cast for this week. And so before we get into a little bit of trivia, Jesse, what did you think of this episode?
So once again, this show continues to amaze me. There are times when people, one of the complaints about the first season of American Gods from a couple people was it didn't drive the story enough.
Right.
And it was just too kind of a random road trip.
Yeah.
And I could get, like last week, you dropped your rating a half a point because you didn't think it advanced the story enough. And I think that's a fair criticism. But I just have really loved this road trip. Next weekend, speaking of brides,
yes.
Linda asked me, hey, can we go it's bluebonnet season here in Texas. And for those of you, we get off on a tangent.
Yes.
Lady Bird Johnson, former First Lady, when she, after LBJ left the White House, one of the things she did is she had enacted where wildflowers were planted across the state so that and because they're wildflowers they would go over, and in the spring there are just seas of bluebonnets. So we're going to get on a road trip and go just look at the bluebonnets. We have no destination, and I feel like the Doom Patrol has a destination, but they're just taking their time getting there. You want to stop and see the world's biggest pie? Let's do it. You want to see, that looks like a fun cabaret? Let's stop and have a drink. And so I just have loved the episodes. I've loved the show, and I cannot wait to talk about Danny the Street with you.
All right, cool. So to kind of give a little background for those who obviously aren't familiar with the Grant Morrison comics, where Danny was originated, this story was essentially loosely based on Doom Patrol Volume 2, issues number 35 and 36 back in 1990. But we have the Bureau of Normalcy, but in the comics it was a group called the Men from Nowhere. And that's an acronym for N, that's N period O period W H, ERE, etc. Kind of like S.H.I.E.L.D., only it's called Nowhere. And Maura Lee Karupt is a brand new character for this story, invented for the series, kind of replacing the role of a character that Morrison used, a young woman named Sarah Furness, who meets Danny before the whole adventure and just becomes just enamored of Danny, and kind of serves as a go-between, kind of like Maura Lee Karupt does, between the patrol and Danny the Street. So thought that was rather interesting. The ant farm, which got a brief mention, when Larry is kind of wheeled, has those little flashbacks back to 1963. The ant farm is something that Morrison introduced in issue number 44, because the Men from Nowhere, as part of their agenda to wipe out things abnormal, they operated in the basement of the Pentagon. So I'm kind of wondering if we'll see that later on. But they have this massive machine deep within the basement of the Pentagon that's growing all the time, and it's intended as the Men from Nowhere's blueprint for the new world order that where every move will be predetermined and there will be no room for oddities. So I'm kind of wondering if the way that kind of this episode was left with Darren Jones, I kind of wonder if we're going to see more of him and more of the Bureau of Normalcy. I can't think that Darren's just going to quit because Maura Lee punched him out.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the last we've seen of him. So I'm kind of wondering if we'll get more of that and introduce more of Morrison's concepts later on in the series.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd bring that up for all you Doom Patrol comics fans out there like me. Topics. Let's get into our main topics. And first topic, I don't have any theme this week because ran out of time. I had a very busy weekend.
Yes.
Obviously with my anniversary and all kinds of other things. Recording a podcast yesterday, next stop everywhere. So ran out of time. Topic number one, I want to talk right off the bat. I want to talk Danny the Street and Maura Lee Karupt. So Jesse, give me your thoughts on our favorite sentient transvestite Street.
So when you mentioned this last week and you said we're going to meet an interesting character, and you hear the word street,
yes,
you tend to think of someone, a street-wise character.
Okay.
Like
it's just some guy that
he's very street cred. Yes.
Yes.
A lot of street cred.
Yes.
And
not an actual street.
Right.
Yes.
And he was or they were a very interesting character. I loved Danny the Street.
Yes.
I love the idea that it's a true street. That he is, or they are.
Yes.
This kind of.
It's okay if you want to,
Well, no, I'm trying to
not worry about the pronouns. Yes.
Yes, but he's trying to be able to see, the safe place.
Yes.
And that to give a safe space for people who are quote unquote different.
Right.
And it is a unique concept.
Right.
Totally concept, and I'm going to take a leap of faith.
Right.
And assume that in your list of things that this will never show up on TV ever.
Yes.
Danny the Street must be, if he's not top 5, they are top 10.
Yes.
And to see this executed so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never read the comic, but just on the executed this well, you must have been doing a fist pump while you're watching this.
As a big Grant Morrison Doom Patrol fan, when Doom Patrol was first announced, there was characters that I hoped I would see.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't sure how they could pull it off, and Danny was one of those that I wasn't sure exactly how they could pull that off, but they did, and I thought they did a really good job, and I was very happy with that. And Danny, as he's presented here, is pretty much on point for the comics. Danny is, at face value, exactly what they seem to be.
Yeah.
Just very friendly, very welcoming, very protective of the people that they take care of. And now Danny here was a little at the end we find out that Danny's a little freaked by Mr. Nobody, but for good reasons, because Danny is worried that worried for the safety of the Dannysons, as we're told, which I thought was very clever, that they refer to Dannysons as opposed to denizens.
Yes.
Of something. That's a very good, nice little clever wordplay there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a little different, but I understand it, and it makes perfect sense. But the whole thing with, I knew right off the bat when the leaves blew into the words "welcome friend" when Agent Morris first walks in to Danny the Street. That was something, as I talked about, that Maura Lee Karupt essentially replaces Sarah Furness. That's what Sarah, when we're first introduced in Danny in the comics, Danny has this thing in the air that spells out "welcome friend," and so I thought that was rather extremely faithful to the comics. And I knew right off the bat that the fact that that's how Danny communicates to people is dead on, and so I was very pleased with that.
Yeah,
I thought it was amazing. Through
yeah.
signs and rearranging letters on storefront windows and all that. That's right out of the comics, right out of Morrison's brain.
So I did not, because I was not familiar with the comic.
Yeah.
I assumed that Danny was a character.
Yes.
And that he was just showing his communication, and later we'd pull back the curtain and we would be able to see him. And then as we continue, I go, oh, it truly is the
street.
Danny the Street. The street is the character.
Yes.
And,
so what did you think? What did you think about that? Not being familiar with the character.
I loved it. I loved it. I loved the concept. I loved the weirdness of it, but also the when I first started watching Farscape, I did not get the concept or why it was important that Moya was a ship, a living ship, as they say.
A sentient ship.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good comparison.
And then, go ahead.
No. I thought that was good. Go ahead. Keep rolling.
So as you watch Farscape, and those of you, if you never had, it's definitely worth the time. It's a very interesting series, and friend of the show, Karen, and I were actually on a podcast where we went through every episode and discussed it. Her being alive becomes important in the series. Yes. So the idea of this sentient street was a great concept. And
Denny's very friendly. It's not like there's there's no malevolent, ulterior motive. Danny is what Danny appears, and I think that's one of the great things. It's this upbeat, like when Agent Morris first walks in, there's this upbeat music playing, and everybody, all the townspeople are happy, they're getting along, but not in a creepy, like weird Children of the Corn type way.
Right.
Just more like they're just very happy to be there. It's almost like it's a utopia, but not one of those like dystopias.
Yeah, where everyone is
it seems idyllic, but then there's some ulterior thing going on.
Yeah, like
that's not the case here.
Yeah, Supernatural just had this season an episode where everyone kind of was hypnotized so that they seemed happy. Yes. Danny accepts everyone.
Right.
And gives everyone a chance to be quote unquote normal, to express themselves in any way. I will admit I did not realize that Alan Mingo Jr. was playing both parts.
Right. So you were surprised that you were fooled by Maura Lee Karupt's identity.
Yeah, yes. I just didn't. You didn't
make the connection.
Yeah, and so I thought that was a nice reveal.
Right.
And I love the idea that almost like the Apostle Paul when he was Saul on the road to Damascus. I can't. I'm saying it wrong. Damascus. Yeah. Where he sees himself and in a new way. And found a way, Agent Morris, he finally had a chance to be free and to do stuff, and that was just beautiful.
Agent Morris Wilson has a great story when she eventually reveals that we were introduced to her early on as Agent Morris Wilson, this agent of the Bureau of Normalcy, essentially tasked with going in and going in with the intention of destroying Danny the Street, because it's this, abomination as they view it.
Yeah.
And once she gets there, uh, realizes that, hey, this is where I feel like this is the part of me that's been missing all my life.
Yeah.
And and now I understand who I want to be.
It's a very upbeat story.
Right.
And especially I love the ending where Agent Morris,
Maura Lee Karupt,
is
yes.
like, I'm gonna just go back. We'll set him off, and I love that Danny the Street said, no, we have to quit running.
Yes.
And the celebration at the end, it was a wonderful, and I think of this as the main storyline.
Oh yeah, that's why I wanted it first, because
absolutely.
It is kind of the driver, even though Danny is essentially a supporting character in Doom Patrol lore. But obviously Danny's the main focus of this story. And and I really liked Maura Lee Karupt, the character, trying to get Larry and Vic, to understand what's going on, kind of butting heads with Vic a little bit, with some serious sass going on. But ultimately, Maura Lee is willing to make that sacrifice and leave town, give up everything that she loves, essentially to protect the others as a selfless act. And then, like you said, Danny says no. Mm-hmm. And then they make their stand. And you notice Agent Morris made the point of going back and coming back out as Maura Lee Karupt to face Darren Jones. And they have that great fight where Darren gets his ass kicked by a drag queen, which I thought was very funny.
It's very funny. It's very perfect.
And yeah, exactly. It's a perfect apropos ending.
Yeah, it just was. You kind of look at it and you go, this is so great. Now, I don't know if the Bureau of Normalcy
right.
is going to stay gone for a while, but at least they've won the day for now, and I was very happy.
You mean Danny the Street and the Danizens have won the day for a while? Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
And to go.
Yeah, I hope we haven't seen the last of Danny. I hope this is a one-off, but I don't think it is.
No,
so I think we'll see more.
I think they'll set that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they made such a strong introduction of these characters. But yeah, I thought that was really great. So, anything else about Danny the Street and Maura Lee Karupt before we move on?
So I don't know. Maybe this would be a bridge to your next topic, but how great was it seeing Matt Bonner and Alan Mingo Jr. sing in their characters?
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk about on the next topic. All right, so topic number 2, as Jesse tees up the segue, Larry in the Bureau of Normalcy I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So Larry still, having his issues, and then once he finds out, once they're he and Vic get this cake brought to them. They're at New Manor, and they get a Danny cake sent from Danny Cake's shop, and it has a map of Danny the Street, and that's how they're kind of tipped off to go looking for Niles there, or at least for looking for information there. And they get into town, and everything, the storefronts are kind of boarded up. Everything looks a bit run down. Primarily, as we find out later, Danny was trying to keep a low profile. And that's where they're kind of they see Peeping Tom's Perpetual Cabaret. And that's also right from the comics, by the way. And so they go in there, and they meet Maura Lee Karupt, and they kind of like realize that, oh, hey, Danny's this sentient thing. Like the actual Street, and Vic has a little hard time with that. and Larry's more like, well, let's just go with the flow here, Vic.
Yes.
And but um, he keeps having these flashbacks. Once he reveals that they're under threat from the Bureau of Normalcy, we get these flashbacks to Larry's time in 1963, and we get a lot more information about him. And so, what did you think about all those flashbacks with Larry?
It was very interesting that um, you. It helps to explain a little bit more why Larry is so standoffish.
Right.
And that he is, he's been burned literally and figuratively in
Yes.
many, many ways. So he is
this is on top of being repressed by his parents and by society and whatnot.
Right. And now
he has all this like actual trauma experience at the hands of the Bureau of Normalcy, as we find out.
Yeah, and they want him to be, you're gonna fight the Red Menace, and you're gonna be a weapon, and he truly is treated horribly.
Right.
And so you kind of understand a little bit what's going on. So I love that. I loved everything about it. I like how he was fighting himself. And, not wanting to be a hero. Vic continues to
try to push him.
To push all of them.
Right.
That's a consistent theme, is Vic cares about these people.
He sees their potential.
He does see their potential. And to see Larry, that fantasy sequence where Larry would have got up and sang.
Right.
And done karaoke.
Yes.
And then you realize go ahead.
This whole elaborate dance number.
Yeah. And then you realize that no, I don't sing, and he's depressed, and you go out. And then you cut to the end when they mention Mr. Nobody and Danny kind of kicks them back home. You see that Larry was singing in the celebration. He was all part of the, he had let himself go.
At
the very end of the episode where he had kind of celebrated.
Apparently he was doing karaoke and singing very badly, as it turns out.
His inner self. Was good fun.
Yes. And I thought Matt Bomer, during that whole dance sequence, dance number, was just fantastic. Very much the showman. Honestly, genuinely seemed to be enjoying himself performing like that.
Yeah.
And as he kind of does this duet with Maura Lee Karupt.
Yeah.
And he's enjoying himself because he's not wearing his bandages. He has his normal face in this fantasy sequence. And just enjoying, feeling like more like himself, I think, than he's ever felt.
Yeah, it was interesting in the real world. Alan Mingo was actually part of the touring cast of Hairspray.
Right.
And Matt, while is not a professional singer, they talked about he sang with Kelly O'Hara in the 2010 Kennedy Center Honors, and on White Collar he sang with Diane Carroll. So he certainly has a beautiful voice and sang. So I figured that was such a bright spot. Which once again shows Danny the Street has a good heart.
Right.
They want everyone to be happy,
no
matter what.
And that's one of the things we find out is that the happier the people are, Danny kind of feeds off that.
Yes.
And that keeps Danny going. Mm-hmm. So Maura Lee mentions this earlier that if the party stops, Danny stops.
And I love that Maura Lee kind of has taken on a leadership role among the neighborhood, and among all the citizens there. It's just lovely.
Yeah. And Oh, and FYI, if you were wondering what song Matt Bomer was singing during that dance number, that was "People Like Us" by Kelly Clarkson.
Ah, very nice.
So now, if you really like that song, you can check that out. So that's where it's from.
I almost thought it might have been an original song because
I
the
thought so.
topics was so on point.
I thought so, but then I did a quick search of the opening lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
and sure enough, it's a Kelly Clarkson song.
Very nice.
But just out of curiosity, I just kind of wanted to track
great.
that down. And I love the fact that Danny arrives in Springfield, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an actual city, and very, very glad to see Springfield getting a little love in this episode.
Ohio gets a lot of love in the DCU on these.
I have to think that's Jeff Johns' influence with the Midwest, and I'm very appreciative of that. Now, so we get those flashbacks with Larry, and that we're talking about. We get the very first emergence of the negative spirit in this. We see it on video, where Larry is shown that, and obviously he freaks out. And this is probably where he has that initial resentment, like this thing is inside of me, and it killed all these people, presumably, all these guys in kind of protective gear that essentially cattle prod Larry to get a reaction from him, and they end up bringing out the negative spirit, which ends up killing them. And Larry's just, I think, horrified by this. So we get a little bit of that backstory. And we find out that, the reason Larry has this patch, is this patch is the logo of the Bureau of Normalcy. So for some reason, I think in a story we haven't gotten yet, Larry keeps this patch for some reason.
Yeah.
And even though it was very traumatic, he still held on to it for some reason that we don't know yet.
By the way, I thought that I don't agree with the Bureau's agenda, but I do think it's a good-looking patch.
You like the design?
I like the design, yes.
Okay, yeah. So So we'll give him at least points for the design, but that's as far as we'll go.
Exactly.
With the Bureau of Normalcy.
Exactly.
Apparently the Bureau, when they were experimenting on Larry, they thought they could harness the radioactive energy inside him as a and weaponize it. And that's the whole reason for the tests, as it turns out. And they force him to, well, hey, you're a soldier, Captain, and your service is compulsory. And force him to do this against his will. And that's obviously part of his trauma. All right. Anything else about Larry, Vic, and the Bureau?
Nope. Just good stuff.
Okay. Oh, I did like Danny's advice to Vic. Saying when they have this little moment at the end where Vic's kind of doubting himself a little bit. And he's, worried. He's like, we need the chief. And, Danny's telling him, like, the chief would be proud of him and whatnot. But Danny's like, when Vic asks Danny about how he knows the chief, Danny's like, well, I'll let Niles tell that story.
Yeah. I also like.
So presumably we'll get more, hopefully later when the chief comes back.
I also really like the. And I did not write it down. You may have. I was late last night watching, so I did not write any lines down.
I got several here.
With Larry talking about, lists all the weird things that happen.
Yes,
like you just got to ride the wave.
Yeah, I've got that. I've got that quote. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
All right. So let's move on to topic number 3, and this I thought was a little kind of funny considering a certain. Next Up Everywhere co-host of ours. So Karen, I want to talk about here, in reference to, of course, to Karen Lindsay, friend of the show.
Yes.
And Rita and Cliff, I want to talk about in this segment. So we're introduced to a new personality of Jane's, who is essentially 1990s rom-com personality that can do love spells, as it turns out.
Now,
and apparently Rita considers her to be the most dangerous of the 64, the worst of the 64.
Yeah, that was
personalities.
Amazing. I I am someone who, not even, I won't even call it a guilty pleasure.
Right.
I find watching the Hallmark Channel movies just popcorn for the mind. You put it
Yes.
on, you know that it's going to end up happy. I grew up with Disney movies, so this is kind of my version.
Yes.
So watching this, um, he's mad at her, he's upset, and
Doug.
Doug, and you watch, Karen,
Mm-hmm.
played by the amazing Diane Guerrero,
Yes.
slip in the mud,
Yes, that
and then
that whole romantic comedy trope
that is
where
just
she's it's raining outside and she goes like, okay, I'm going to protect him with my sweater, and then she does a face plant or she slips in this puddle of mud, and it's raining and whatnot, and she's talks about like, well, I guess I don't make a very good umbrella, like this very rom-com type line,
yeah.
and just all going through all the tropes of romantic comedy movies.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Um,
And she's all perky and says cutesy things, and she's all girly, and
and
uh,
talking to Rita, you're my bestie, you're my best friend, of course. And then to
Rita's seriously annoyed with her,
yeah,
which is that's funny.
and at first you're like, okay, why? Yes, she's annoying, but is she necessarily dangerous? But
Right.
then you can see
Well,
she
when she starts
is.
using her powers,
Yeah.
we kind of see the threat because she puts everybody under the love spell. Like, we find out Doug. I'm kind of getting ahead a little bit. Give this little backstory that apparently we're told by Rita that whenever Jane gets at a particularly low point, um, Jane kind of gets supplanted by Karen.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of go-to emergency personality, and Karen apparently has created this whole other lifestyle for herself on the side, and that involves this guy named Doug, who apparently she's broken up with and gotten back together over and over like 1,000 times, according to Rita. And Doug's family is sick of her and can't believe that Doug keeps going back to her. So there's this kind of conflict there. But Karen uses her love spell powers, brings back Doug, whammies Doug, then whammies the family, so that they go along with this idea. Like Karen proposes to Doug, and at first he's not like wanting to go along with this, and then she whammies him, and then the family's all upset about it, and then she whammies them, and eventually she whammies Rita and brings her along into going along with this idea, and you see this threat that
Yes.
that she's this emergency fantasy life, and she's willing to do anything to keep that fantasy going.
Yes.
No,
Absolutely.
no matter the morality of the issue. And so it's a very interesting. And again, Diane Guerrero is just amazing. That there's a great scene in the kitchen where, like I guess, Karen is getting something out of the fridge, and then Hammerhead kind of quickly manages to regain control and confronts Rita about like, hey, you better not let Doug get anywhere near my body.
Right.
But Karen ends up reasserting control, and so just this kind of on and off, back and forth, personality shows just what amazing acting talent that Diane Guerrero is.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the different personalities back and forth. And the idea of a lot of them being afraid of Karen, even though Karen is just this, seems to be sweet and, oh, no,
Right.
oh, we're good. So I thought that was a pretty interesting, fun, kind of take on this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now Cliff, meanwhile, was left on the front porch by Karen.
Mm-hmm.
He shows up there looking for Jane, looking to apologize for all the crap that he said in the previous episode, Therapy Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Because of Admiral Whiskers getting inside him or whatnot.
Yes.
He tried to when Karen called in on the phone at Doom Manor, picks up the phone, he starts trying to apologize there. Doesn't really happen. And then he shows up at Karen's front porch, in this little house that she's got, and or Doug's house, whatever, I'm not sure. And he tries to apologize to her there. She essentially closes the door in his face and leaves him outside.
Mm-hmm.
And because she's saying, well, this is really important that this goes well. And she keeps calling him Cliffy, all perky and whatnot, and shuts him out. So Cliff is kind of left okay, now what? So he just kind of hangs out there on the front porch all day. And this kid rides by on his bike, kind of sees him and does a look or whatnot, and then rides off, and then comes back later that night in some homemade robot costume made out of cardboard boxes and tinfoil and whatnot. And essentially they have a dance-off, bro. And to quote Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy.
And Cliff is like, hey, I've seen Flashdance.
87 times or something.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm ready. Yeah, that was really.
But they have this little bonding moment, and it's kind of funny that after the dancing, then Cliff's opening up to the kid, talking about this dream that he had, somebody's welding him, but then when he opens up, they pull back the welding mask, it's Jennifer Beals, who was in Flashdance.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's it. I thought that was great. The idea that it turns out that Cliff is getting more and more comfortable with himself and talking to them. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, you notice that Cliff's actually talking to a kid.
Yeah, I love that.
So, it's for the guy who doesn't think he could be a father to someone,
mm-hmm.
he's actually getting along with a kid.
Yeah,
and having a conversation. And he tells the kid to keep it real as he gets pulled inside. And at this point, Karen tries to whammy him to make him go along with everything. But, hey, he's a robot. He has robot eyes.
Yeah,
doesn't work.
Yeah, not going to work that way.
Not going to work. And so she's a little thrown by that.
Mm-hmm.
And, Doug comes up and is like, oh, cool, a robot. You've got me a robot or whatever. And kind of they get into a little shoving match, sort of, because Doug tries to shove him, doesn't work. So then Cliff kind of taps him back and sends him crashing on a chair.
Yeah.
And that's where things kind of unravel for Karen. She kind of loses it a little bit, and Hammerhead comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But Hammerhead is just so pissed at everything. Hammerhead tries to kill Doug.
Yes.
So what did you think of that moment?
He is first off, poor Doug is just not very smart.
Right.
And then and Hammerhead is just so crazy
volatile
at times. Yeah, and volatile is a better choice. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting. I'm glad how they got out of this.
Right.
It was an entertaining subplot.
Yes.
And so it did not. It isn't like I said, come on, let's get back to Danny the Street. I enjoyed this twist on it. But I'm kind of. I hope this gets. And we kind of get where Jane's messed up again now at the end.
Yeah, that was so the ending essentially. Karen kind of realizes, she loses everything because that love spell kind of wears off after Hammerhead trying to kill Doug, and Doug is horrified. The family's horrified, and then we kind of see things from Jane's perspective, through Jane's eyes, as Karen is kind of dragged back into Jane's mindscape, and pulled back to the underground.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, we get to see a little taste of the underground, where you see a train track, and Karen is like clutching, trying to stay from being pulled back in. And she's holding on the track, but then gets pulled back in, and that's kind of the cliffhanger, and that sets up next week's episode, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But next week's episode is something that I have been really hoping to see on Doom Patrol, and can't wait for next week. Let's just leave it right there. Leave it right there for now until we talk about our next week on Titan Talk.
Okay.
So I'll just leave that little tease there. But very cool ending, and I can't wait for next week. All right. So how many? You said you didn't have any favorite quotes of the episode.
Please share us.
All right. So favorite lines. Larry, of course, with the line as he and Vic walk into Danny the street for the first time, where Larry says, "Follow the cake, Vic. Always follow the cake."
Yeah, that was a good line. Larry can be very dry. He's dry at times.
Yeah, dry. Larry has a very dry sense of humor, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
There's the exchange between Vic and Maura Lee in the club, where Maura Lee is trying to help Vic understand what Danny the Street is. And Vic is like, "The street's a he," and Maura Lee says, "Danny's genderqueer, and they use non-binary pronouns." And Vic is all, okay. And Maura Lee's like sassy as ever, goes, "Oh, isn't that cute? Robo-Boy doesn't understand non-binary. Let me see if I can explain it to you in a language in which you can understand. 01001110. Make sense?" And Vic is all like, "Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to find my middle finger emoji."
Yes.
And then Maura Lee snaps back, "Oh, this sweet little snack's a bit salty. I like it. If you ever want to leave Westworld and come live with the Danizens, just let me know." So I like the little Westworld nod there.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Very clever. Very sassy line. And I love Maura Lee in that line, or that scene. It was very funny. Another scene when Vic and Larry, after they leave Peeping Toms for the first time, they're out in the street, and Vic says, "The street talks. Of course the street talks. Why wouldn't the street talk?" And Larry responds, "Well, donkey dimension, decreator, group therapy, just ride the wave, Vic."
Yeah, exactly.
So just roll with it. And that's a good advice, especially if you're reading Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol run. Highly recommend that. One of the lines between Karen and Rita I thought was rather funny, where Karen tells Rita, "Dougie and I are endgame." And Rita replies, "I don't know what that means. I just know that it's youthful and irritating."
That is greatness.
Yes.
And, of course, endgame is a term that shippers use often when they're tracking their favorite TV
basically, this
couples.
This is where they need to end up. These two together.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was very funny from Rita. And then lastly, the big exchange between Darren Jones and Maura Lee Karupt, when they're just about having just before their big brawl in the street, in Danny the Street. Darren says, "No, this is not who you are, Morris. You're a man. This place, these people are," and Maura Lee interrupts, "No, you don't get to tell me or anyone else who they are ever again. I am proud of the person I see in the mirror. My face is beat, my look is flawless, and I am dusted from head to toe. The only thing I am not is scared of you."
Yes.
So
really nice. Very empowering episode.
You go, girl.
Indeed.
Exactly. Yeah, so I thought that was good.
Yes.
So what's your rating for this episode?
So once again, they're on a roll. I give it 9 out of 10 drag queen karaoke songs.
Nice. I enjoyed this one a bit. It's just, obviously we're not hitting the main storyline, but it's, I loved it quite a bit. So I gave it 8.5, just a little bit under you. 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10 Danny cakes with
Yes.
maps on top. So I love the icing. Like the icing was a map, and I love that. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, go here. So
Yeah.
so very cool episode, and so I have some Titans Tower news, but very quick Titans Tower news. Kieran Walters, who you remember on Titan Season 1, he played Jason Todd.
Yes.
Apparently, he's been bumped up to series regular. So it looks like we're going to be seeing a lot more of Jason Todd in Season 2.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
should obviously make some interesting conflicts. Presumably a lot of, dare we say, Nightwing and Robin team-ups, which would be nice to see.
Yes.
We do have some Tell It to Titan talk.
Good.
Once again, Holly Mack writes in, Holly
Thank
from
you,
Wisconsin.
Holly.
And she writes in, hey, Charles and Jesse, what another great episode. Love the idea of Danny the Street. I wonder if we won't see the Street again later on in the series. I suggest that we probably will, because he does reoccur in Morrison's run. I know they don't want to get involved because of Mr. Nobody, but if it's to help Niles, they might change their mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, out of all the personalities that we've seen of Jane's, I have to admit that Karen is the scariest of them. The scariest of them. A little too sweet, and if you make me angry, I'll put the whammy on you, and you'll do whatever I want you to. I almost thought that Dougie was behind Karen's powers, but not the case. So glad that Cliff was not affected by Karen's powers. Exactly.
Yes.
So that was good. Good resolution. The Department of Normalcy. I'm guessing it won't be the last time we see of them. Probably not, I'm guessing. Loved Maura's takedown of his former partner and Larry warming to him as well. I'll wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin. So,
very nice. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you once again, Holly. Always great to hear from you. And if you want to be like Holly, and please write in. Let us know what you're thinking. If you're enjoying Doom Patrol or not, hopefully you are. Let us know. Drop us a line here at TitanTalkCast@gmail.com. That's TitanTalkCast@gmail.com, just like Holly did. Or you can reach us at TitanTalkCast on the Twitter machine. Or you can reach us on Facebook at Titan Talk, the Titans Podcast. We'd love to have you like and follow us, and please share that with your friends if you're so inclined, because that would help, obviously, people find us and build us up on social media so that we get more noticed. So that's always a good thing, right? Hopefully.
Absolutely.
And your help would be definitely appreciated by both Jesse and myself, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Good.
All right. Jesse, how about you? Where can they reach you on the interwebs?
Well, I am on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. I am on Facebook, Jesse Jackson in Louisville, Texas. You can hear me talk Doctor Who with Charles on Next Stop Everywhere, and I'm showing up about once a month right now. We're having some guest hosts, some part-time companions, and it's been amazing, so continue to check that episode. And then I am almost at the tail end of 40 Days of Springsteen, which is actually going to be 47 days.
You decided to extend it a whole nother week.
Well, what happens, this is under the side topic of, I don't know if anyone cares, but Ash Wednesday. Of course you care. Yeah, Ash Wednesday to Easter is 6 weeks, and it is routinely known as 40 Days of Lent. Right. But the Catholic Church does not count Sundays as a day of Lent. So it is actually 47 days from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday. So I have to do 47 episodes if I'm going to do that whole time. And
that sounds way too complicated.
I know. So there will end up being 47 episodes of 40 Days of Springsteen. But I've had a couple people step up and to offer do some episodes, and I appreciate it. We've heard some from great people sharing, so that's been wonderful. Charles, how about you?
Well, of course, at Charles Skaggs on the Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. And my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn Good Coffee and Hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Titan Talk, including Titans news, Doom Patrol news, news of the other DC Universe shows coming up, Young Justice, Outsiders, Stargirl, Swamp Thing, etc. News of my other podcasts they do for Southgate Media, including Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast they do with you, Jesse, and Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with Zan Sprouse, wife of comic artist Chris Sprouse. Now, Zan is going to be joining, we talk about all things Twin Peaks David Lynch on that podcast, but Zan's going to be joining us on Next Stop Everywhere, coming up with episode 139. So I'm very excited about that, to talk Doctor Who instead of Twin Peaks with Zan for the first time. And looking forward to that as we talk about the greatest show in the galaxy from classic Who in 1988, Sylvester McCoy era. And we get to talk about the Seventh Doctor and Ace and all kinds of stuff. So looking forward to that. Finally get to talk some 80s Doctor Who after a long while. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Other than that, please check those podcasts out. And also please go to Southgate Media Group and support the Southgate Media Group Patreon page, because that helps keep the lights on here at Titan Talk. And I'm sure our executive producer, Rob Southgate, would definitely appreciate that. And other than that, next time on Titan Talk, we're going to talk Jane Patrol.
Nice.
With Doom Patrol episode 9. So we're kind of like this episode here with Danny Patrol we're kind of at the halfway point of season 1 already.
Okay.
And it's been a great season so far. I can't imagine what the back half's going to bring. And in this episode, Jane Patrol, coming up next week, again, this is something I've been looking forward to, and I've really been hoping they were going to do, and it looks like they are, where Jane retreats into the underground, a treacherous place within her own mind space, where she encounters her many personas and dark traumas of her past. Now, if you're a Grant Morrison Doom Patrol fan, looks like this episode is going to be pretty much an adaptation of Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 30, which was a story called Going Underground. And this was one of my favorite Doom Patrol stories ever. And it's so powerful. And the dynamic between Cliff and Jane as Cliff explores the underground and encounters the various personalities face to face. We learn a lot about Jane in this story. We should. And it just shows, again, this is going to be probably how Cliff and Jane patch things up with one another, I'm hoping. So this should be a rather big episode.
Yeah, this sounds great.
And I can't wait for this. And hopefully they do it right. I've seen the trailer, and we got to see little hints of what I think is Hammerhead, and we also get to see Penny Farthing. And so I'm hoping we're going to see some other ones. Especially I want to see Driver 8, who's the one who is essentially the conductor of the underground that takes the personalities from place to place within her mindscape. And I'm really hoping we'll see Driver 8. So fingers crossed for this.
Yeah, I liked it. I watched the preview too, and it would be very interesting, and we'll see if they actually hire some other actors to play the different personas.
Well, it looks like they do.
Yeah, so that could be very cool.
Yeah, because the personalities are inside her, so they don't necessarily look like Diane Guerrero.
Exactly. I think that is great.
Which obviously takes a little heavy lifting off of Diane Guerrero.
Yes,
for once, because she doesn't have to portray every single personality.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes them more distinctive, I think, that way.
Yeah, I think so too. Good.
So yeah, I can't wait for this episode. I'm hoping will be a very high rating for me. So we'll see. We'll find out.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
All right. So everybody, thank you again for listening to Titan Talk. And so come on back next week. We're going to talk Jane Patrol, and it's going to hopefully be a good one. And we will see you next time right here on Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.